The UN just put out one. Palestinian Committee on Human Rights put out one with interviews with detainees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People from various different prisons and different detention centers report that it's common practice to be starved and then have food thrown at them and told to act like animals.
Yeah.
People have been told to bark like dogs frequently, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that's also like there was in the aftermath of the overthrow of Assad, when there was sort of all these like crazy groups running around Syria and stuff, that was something that you saw often when basically ISIS groups would detain people and arrest people. They would make them bark like dogs. And it is just Islam has a different relationship to dogs than other religions, I guess, do. And this is just like a way to humiliate and degrade people.
Yes. But it's also, I think it's like symptomatic. There's something a little more than that, which is, we think of Yoav Gallant early on, after October 7th, talking about how they're fighting human animals.
Exactly.
Right? And one thing that the Israelis have been doing, and this is like another way in which you're trying to make your victim conform to your image of them, right? Is, of course, the Palestinians are people with like extreme dignity, and they've shown this through their like steadfast resistance for so many years. But the Israelis really like think of them as like dirty Arabs. That's a thing that's been talked about all the time, that they're human animals. And so when they're, bombing Gaza and making dirty water run through the street, when they're making people sleep outside by destroying all their houses, when they're denying them access to food such that people have to eat animal feed as the only thing they can possibly do, that's a way of them like, having this like, it's called like false projection in like critical theory psychology, that they're trying to make their image in their head reality in the world.
But that corresponds exactly to what you were talking about with the torturer.
Exactly.
Sort of speaking through the victim there.
Torture is like a way, I think, of like false projection, like made flesh. That like I have these delusions about the world where like everything, instead of the normal like intercourse we have with the world, the way cognition or thinking would normally work, right? Where there's an outside object and I have my concept of it, but I retain some aspect of it that is like outside of me, and like that interplay between me and the outside world is where like thinking happens, right? If false projection is trying to make the outside world just resemble your own content, right? I don't care what's happening outside because all of it comes under my own delusion, my own heading, right? That you and your individuality, or an object in its individuality, is just a canvas for my thoughts.
God, I mean, it's not just the Israelis who think like this these days.
Yeah, true enough. And this is like, it's similar to like paranoia, which is like an interpretation mania, where everything gets filtered through my delusion, and it's either friend or foe, right? And so the outside world is like robbed of its texture and its richness and its actual qualities, and everything must be connected to me. It's like a form of like experiencing omnipotence and like a godlike power, even as you feel under attack. And the more under attack you feel, the more godlike you feel, because you know everything that's happening. And what the Israelis and Nazis, I'll participate in this psychology as well very much, what they have is like a persecution complex, right? They really feel like they're constantly under attack.
I've noticed.
But they, unlike an individual psychotic person, have the actual means to make their delusions come true. To like, okay, you're my enemy, I'm going to treat you like that. I'm actually going to kill you. And part of what like torture is, like you hear constantly, like Ben Gvir talks about it this way, like all of the like various members of Knesset on the Israeli media, they refer to basically every Palestinian detainee as a nukba.
Yeah.
Which is, it means elite, and it's the name of like the elite force, special forces in the Hamas's Al-Quds force, right? And regardless of who the detainee is, they'll call them a nukba. And they mean it kind of as a slur, as like, see, like these are your best guys, and look at what we're doing to them now. But it's also like because these people are genuinely like paranoiac, delusional subjects. And so for them, just like the mere fact of being captured, the mere fact that we are doing violence to you, well, that's because you're an enemy. And we know you're an enemy because we're killing you, right? And so it's this circular logic of delusion that constitutes it, and also gives them license to enact this insane violence. Like there's that one member of Knesset who, after TrheAnon, was asked by one of the Arab MKs, like, okay, like, do you think it's okay to insert a stick into a detainee's rectum? And he's like, yeah, if he's a nukba, everything is permitted.
Everything is.
Yes.
And this is a psychology that is ingrained in Israeli society.
Yeah.
If it's a nukba, everything is permitted, and everybody is nukba.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a mass arrests of Palestinians ever since October 7th, not just in Gaza, but in everywhere. I think there was something like 10,000 Palestinians in Israel were arrested in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. 1,000 of them are still held basically incommunicado.
Yeah, which is also, I should say, torture. You're not allowed to do that. That's also a separate crime of enforced disappearance.
Yes.
And
I mean,
holding
this is something, there's like a lot of movies about happening in South America or whatever,
Right,
you know what I mean, in Argentina, et cetera, et cetera. But like there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that were essentially disappeared in Israeli prisons and detention centers, many of which sprung up or are ad hoc. They're not all in like official Israeli prisons. Not that it matters, because under Israeli laws, well, I mean, this is the thing. Under Israeli laws, they don't have to like actually do anything with your case for 6 months, but they also don't even follow their own laws.
Right.
So you might just be in there forever.
Yeah.
There is a
well, you can just infinitely extend that administrative detention.
Yeah, exactly. Which
So,
is famously also what the Nazis did.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and this goes for everyone. There's I think there's Palestinian Authority elections coming up, and Marwan Barghouti has announced his candidacy, and he's sort of seen as this figure that would unite the different wings of the Palestinians, etc. Hamas, demanding his release. He's a member of Fatah, or was a member of Fatah. But Ben Gvir, and he's been in prison for I think 2 decades.
Yeah, something like that. It's been a real long
and
time.
not the first time either. He's been detained before then. Detained in prison before then. Ben Gvir videotaped him going into his room and being like, "We're gonna torture you."
Yeah.
He videotaped himself and put out that video.
Yeah.
This is state policy.
Yes.
This isn't something that Ben Gvir is called up in front of the Knesset afterwards to explain or anything. This is state policy. This is society wide.
Yeah.
And Barghouti has been tortured. There's I think an Israeli lawyer came out and said recently that every time he goes to meet his clients, they rape them beforehand. The Red Cross is now being denied. Oh, they already were being denied entrance.
They were de facto being denied entrance, and then now, as a matter of policy, they're still going to be denied, but it's now they can't bring any recording devices in. They can't meet with multiple people at once. The visits are shortened to 15 minutes or something crazy like that. They don't get to meet privately. So no one's going to testify about what's happening to them, because if they do, the Israelis are going to torture them more.
And basically, if you are Palestinian, there doesn't need to be a crime. You don't need to be seen doing something or suspected of doing something or know anybody. You can be picked up anywhere at any point by basically any person.
Yeah.
You can be just detained by settlers, picked up by the IDF, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But essentially any member of Israeli society can feed you into this machine. So there is a law about unlawful combatants. And this is a phrase that might be familiar to people who were alive back in the early 2000s. But it is a phrase that I thought originated in the U.S., but apparently the Knesset tried to pass a law about the detaining of quote-unquote unlawful combatants in 2001, which predates the U.S. using that phrase in 2002 by obviously a year. But there's an interesting dialectical relationship there between the U.S. torture regime and the Israeli torture regime.
Yeah.
That I think plays out in that and in our practice of torture at Guantanamo. And I know that you've done some legal work around Guantanamo Bay prisoners. Have you been to Guantanamo?
No, because when I was doing that stuff, it was 2020 into 2021, and so it was quarantine. So they wouldn't wouldn't let anyone go unless you were directly one of their attorneys. And I was a legal fellow, so I was on the team doing it. So I didn't get to go.
Oh, he's a legal fellow.
Right, a fellow. Yeah. And I also didn't have my security clearance until towards the end. But no, I didn't get to go.
You're not getting that shit now, brother.
No, I know. I think I still have it. I think it's like,
does it not expire?
it expires
It's
after
a
like some
Chinese
period
visa.
of years, but it's only like related to this one case, and like we got the guy out, so
Yeah.
I don't need it anymore.
There you go.
Yeah.
But there is like there's this dialectical relationship, right? Where like they build off of each other because the Knesset failed to pass that bill in 2001 about unlawful combatants.
Yeah.
The U.S. basically, I mean, that wasn't like a bill. The U.S. was just like, this is a new term that we invented.
Yeah.
And then the next year, the Knesset does pass that as sort of this like war on terror adjacent kind of
Yes.
thing. What is an unlawful combatant?
An unlawful combatant is a nonsense thing that has no basis in law. So under international humanitarian law, which is IHL, law of war, there are two categories of people. There's combatants and there's civilians. And you fall into one of those two categories at all times. And the reason that you have those two categories is that if you are a combatant, you can be detained as a prisoner of war, right? It's not like you've committed a crime, it's just you have been captured.
Yeah.
And then you get detained basically until the end of hostilities.
And there are certain legal responsibilities
Yes.
that the country or whatever force that captured you has to carry out.
Yes. These are enumerated in the Geneva Convention, but like the most basic ones are, you're not allowed to torture people. You're not allowed to beat them. You have to give them adequate food and lodging. You're not allowed to force people to serve in your military.
Yeah.
Which is a thing the Israelis do. Not in the sense of like they're forcing Palestinians to like take up arms against other Palestinians, but when they basically use human shields, which is a routine Israeli practice, they call it like mosquitoes. They'll they'll capture someone and make them act as like a minesweeper or as like a human minesweeper, or like enter buildings to make sure there's no booby traps, or go and relay messages to other people, and then they'll usually like kill or torture them after that anyway. But that's like conscripting someone to serve a military function for you, right? Which you're not allowed to do. And so these are like the most basic treatments. And then, after in like I think it's the 70s, through like the wave of decolonial wars, they add another protocol to the Geneva Conventions, Additional Protocol 1. Because Geneva Conventions, as written, were written in the late 40s.
Yeah.
And so they were cognizing like wars between states, where the idea that you would be a prisoner of war is like not, it's uncontroversial. It's like that guy's wearing that uniform, right? But in the wake of all the decolonial wars happening through the mid-century, there were armed groups that didn't have sovereignty yet. That was the whole point.
Yeah.
And so what Additional Protocol 1 does is if you're fighting to like get rid of the yoke of colonial oppression, you're entitled to prisoner of war status, even if you are not in a formal military. Because the whole point is like you can't be in a formal military. You're trying to assume sovereignty.
You're trying to be in a formal military?
Exactly, yeah. You're trying to be. And so you are entitled to prisoner of war status. And so the idea of an unlawful combatant is basically they're saying, well, you're definitely not a civilian because you are fighting us. Or in the case, it's like we're pretending that, and we just want to detain you forever. But we also don't want to recognize your struggle as legitimate, and we don't want to give any kind of legitimacy to you as an armed group. So we're going to create this hybrid status, which is neither criminal nor military, and in fact just enables us to detain you forever without any kind of like determination that we're able to do so, and without, they argue, having to afford you the protections of the Geneva Convention. Which is also just like not the case. Those always apply no matter what. Common Article 3, which details like the minimum treatment anyone's entitled to. In every case, no matter what, you're entitled to that. Another thing you're entitled to if you're captured is a determination as to whether you're a prisoner of war, right? That had to be won at the Supreme Court in the United States in relation to Guantanamo. Even the idea that these people could get representation to challenge their detention. Yeah. And most people who went through Guantanamo, like the vast majority, were never charged with a crime.
Yeah.
And many of them were just random guys.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, anyway, so the idea that someone can be an unlawful combatant is this kind of like sui generis legal regime that the Israelis and the Americans are like really innovating and practicing, as a way of kind of casting entire populations into permanent detainability or like permanent killability. This is what it means to like be a terrorist, right? Other nonsense phrase, that there's no like definition can accurately like circumscribe it to say like, okay, if these guys are terrorists, then why aren't the U.S. military terrorists?
Yeah.
Like there's no way to actually do it.
Just bombing a house of civilians didn't make you a terrorist.
Right, exactly. And so, like, these wars that the U.S., the quote unquote war on terror, is theoretically and in practice so far infinite in duration
Yep.
and infinite in scope, geographical scope.
Yep.
And similarly, the Israeli war against the Palestinians is infinite in duration and infinite in scope within the territory that Israel controls.
Yeah. Well,